yeah, yeah, yeah. All right. I think we should make that leaf symbol black, because we're in mourning. Actually,
Yeah.
we're in evening.
Eh. Nothing will be dark enough to reflect the horrors in the bottom of my soul when it comes to this sort of thing.
Uh, you know, um, why don't we just jump right into the script and tell me what you think and what the experts are saying about Keith Pelly and how he will arrange things. So, like, is he going to make real repairs on the ship, or is he just going to move the deck chairs around?
Well, I expect a lot of very concise and very good sounding things to come out of the Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment front
Cheers.
office, but potentially not a lot of substance. He's been an executive with TSN. He was a team president and CEO of the Toronto Argonauts. He was the president of Rogers Media. He was the commissioner and CEO of the PGA's European Tour. But, he's very good at tailoring messages. So now that he's got the Raptors and the Maple Leafs under his belt, he kind of had to take a step forward, particularly with the exit of Brendan Shanahan. He's now basically put himself up as a target for disgruntled fans, which is not a position you ever want to be in. But the fact that he's decided not to get another president at this point means he's looking to take on fan dissatisfaction himself and perhaps find a way to pour oil on the waters. So,
okay. I'm going to say this. I'm going to say that I don't think he came into this job that he has saying to himself, I'm getting rid of Bill Manning and I'm going to get rid of Shanahan because I don't think presidents are necessary in the grand scheme of the executive order. I think Bill Manning suffered the indignation of a poor result by TFC. The Argos couldn't save him because, quite frankly, the Argos were a self-propelling organization, right? Because of Pinball Clemens. We all know the respect level that he has. And then, of course, you have the Maple Leafs. Well, they're their big money maker. No, they're not. The NBA team is. Just so we're on the same page, everybody. As good as the Maple Leafs are, and as we look at them as Torontonians or Canadians, we go on the assumption that hockey is the boss because it's the boss to us. But in fact, the NBA draws a lot more money, and the best way to draw that conclusion and the way to support that thinking is how much the players get paid in basketball compared to hockey. And you have to factor the fact that there's 23 players, where in basketball there's 12 or something like that, 13, half as many players. But still, they make more than twice as much as hockey players. So as far as I'm concerned, the math still says that the NBA is a bigger moneymaker. So what that leads me to believe is that Keith Pelly's problem is that the Maple Leafs, while they may not be the most important franchise under their umbrella, they're the flagship team organization that MLSE fans care about. In other words, the MLSE fans that are basketball fans are passengers to a greater NBA, whereas the Maple Leaf fans are the flagship, not just for MLSE, they're the flagship for the NHL. There is no team that's more popular than the Toronto Maple Leafs. So we talked about pressure in previous shows. People talk about pressure. I just laid it out for you.
And here's the thing. He's now got the target firmly on his back because the Maple Leafs now have to get from point A, which is they haven't won a cup since 1967, to point B, we've actually won a cup. And a lot of people have thought that they could do the job that Pelly has been tasked with now. But the fact of the matter is almost every single one of them have failed to deliver on said promise since that time. he has said publicly that he's going to give Berube more power when it comes to decision making. So that is something
The
that's
two of them. The two
positive.
of them.
Yeah.
He's giving both of them. He's leaning on them more. He feels he doesn't need a president when he can lean on these two for now, at least. Having said that, right? So carry on. I'm sorry. I just want to make sure that point is made, right? That he is not necessarily giving them the power, but he is giving them his ear.
So, you let the hockey minds do the hockey mind thing, and you let him take care of the business side of things. What it really boils down to here is management, specifically in the form of Brendan Shanahan, didn't appear to have as much faith in the hockey minds that they hired as Pelly now seems to have in the guys that he currently has. There is a certain part of me that was curious as to why Dubas got the job.
Oh, well, Dubas got the job. We talked about that. Dubas got the job, and it doesn't take much to add 2 + 2. Dubas was inexperienced enough that Shanahan could basically make up for his inexperience. The problem is what Shanahan failed to realize. He was just as inexperienced. It's one thing to sit in the NHL head office and deem what's a bad check or a good check. That's one thing. But running a hockey team, a little bit different. And that is the root of the problem, as far as I'm concerned, with the Maple Leafs under Shanahan. He overestimated his knowledge and his ability, to run the team. He did a great job in the thing with the players, bringing the former players in and making them feel at home, getting Dave Keon's number up in the rafters. All that wonderful stuff that he did was great. Those were historical issues and problems with the Maple Leafs. But what he didn't have was the wherewithal to understand clearly. He didn't understand, because he was willing to step in when it came to Dubas and stuff Dubas did. A story's out right now that he could have had Fleury. The Leafs could have had Fleury, and Shanahan poo-pooed it. Said, nope, you're not doing that deal. So we know that Shanahan exercised the power to say no to Dubas. So whatever Dubas said, Shanahan had to say yes. So we know that a lot of the failures that Dubas had, I'll blame them on inexperience, but he had some assistance with a guy that really didn't understand what it took to create a championship team. And that person is Shanahan. A great human being, great hockey, a guy who's not just an all-star, a Hall of Famer, all that wonderful stuff, but he was not an experienced GM. And this has been the repeat problem with the Toronto Maple Leafs over the decades. They constantly bring in guys who've never coached, guys who've never been GMs. They bring these people in and they don't know what they're doing. And people are surprised that the team doesn't work out well. And this was the biggest mistake that Shanahan made. He had it set for him. He had one of the best players in the National Hockey League to come in decades. He had him handed to him. He didn't have to do anything. He just had to let his team suck and then get a good pick, and there you go. And then he had multiple players that were really good that he drafted, Marner and Nylander, and he had one of the best players in the National Hockey League say, hey, I want to play for your team. And then what happened? The rest is, as they say, history.
Yeah, the proof is unfortunately in the pudding, and this particular pudding feels like it's been left on a picnic table at the picnic for too long. It's, I'm glad that he finally got in with the National Hockey League team, and he's had experience since 2014 with the Flames. He also had time in 2003. He was the AGM with the Phoenix Coyotes, as well as the general manager for the San Antonio Rampage. So at least this time the Leafs have got somebody like Brian Burke who has experience. But at the same time, unlike Brian Burke, I don't feel he's so out of touch with the hockey landscape and the way that the game has been shifting that he's not capable of building a proper team.
There's truth in the fact that thinking can get stale, right? So, and this is one of those things I like to believe, because I got to hope it's true, that just because somebody reaches a level of certain age, it doesn't mean they're incapable of learning. And because somebody reaches a certain age, their mental capacity will now begin to suffer. Different people age differently. So I'm not sure I agree with that, but there is something to what you said that one has to consider, and that is the methodology of what one thinks makes a great hockey team. That methodology may not succeed in today's environment the same way a coach who hits a player over the head and says, you got to do what I say, that coach is not going to coach in the National Hockey League today, right? So there are differences that are in play now. What I will say as well, before I wanted to mention something as more of the devil's advocate, because out on the internet, in defense of Brendan Shanahan, in defense of Kyle Dubas, in defense of the Leaf team the way they are, there's a conversation out there, Aaron, you probably heard, where there's now this rethinking because the season isn't over. And when the Leafs lost to Florida, all they were considering was the fact they didn't make it to the second round, right? That was the consideration. That's what the terrible thing that the Leaf organization did. And now we see that Florida is literally putting a licking on the Canes. So the question is a fair question. Does that mean that the Leafs were closer to getting to the Cup than people actually realize?
As someone who always likes to see the Leafs glass as half full, I definitely have to say that based on the fact that the Leafs did manage to win 3 games in their series with the Florida Panthers, they're doing a darn sight better than the Carolina Hurricanes currently are. You know, they're sitting one loss away from being eliminated again, and interestingly enough, not winning a game in the third round again.
16 of them, 16 times in a row, they've been unable to win a game in the second round. They've lost 16 games in a row.
It's baffling to me because technically and on paper, Carolina has the horses to get this done. But I think a lot of people discount Florida because, oh, it's Florida. It's a sunshine state. What do they know about building a hockey team? And from where I'm sitting right now, a heck of a lot more than a lot of folk in Canada do, because they're still in the playoffs and they're heading to the finals.
I'm going to say this, and I'm going to say it with total sincerity, without absence of any kind of sarcasm. The Carolina Hurricanes are the Toronto Maple Leafs of the last, not this year, of the previous 4 or 5 years. Lots of talent, great players, puck controlling team that can't handle physical play. And I make that comparison judiciously, not just vicariously, right? I'm actually making that honest calculation. So what I'm saying is that Florida is the kind of team that you talked about, that Burke is over. You know, Burke's era it actually isn't over because it still exists. You know, this goes back to the guy that built, the colonel that built Maple Leaf Gardens, and used to say, if you can't beat him in the alley, you can't beat him on the ice. And the Florida Panthers are the team that'll beat you in the alley, and that's what ends up happening on the ice. So I wanted to finish by saying, to that context, I want to add one more qualifier that makes me say the Leafs were better than people think. Because I don't want anybody to think that we're here to just credit because they lost their garbage. We don't think that way. I know you don't, Aaron. I know I don't. So here's the other qualifying comment that I will make that people don't like to hear. And that is the Toronto Maple Leafs of this year went to 7 games against Florida that everybody's starting to say, yep, that's the Stanley Cup champion, that put out the Leafs' number 1 goaltender. The Leafs went to 7 games with their backup goaltender. And anybody who doesn't understand what that means, let me help you understand. Bobrovsky gets hurt in the first game in the series against Carolina. Is this the same series? Bobrovsky gets hurt in the first game against the Maple Leafs. Was that series going to end up the way it did? My friends, the answer is basically simple. Very, very simple. So Florida, whether you want to blame Florida for Stolar's absence in the series, I'll put that aside. Let's put that aside. But can anyone deny that they benefited from the absence of Stolarz?
Oh, there is no doubt in my mind that Florida took every single advantage once Stolarz was out. And Vitek Vanacek, no offense to Vitek Vanacek, but he's doing something I can never do, obviously. But he is not nearly the same goalie as Sergei Bobrovsky is, especially in the playoffs. So to think that had the same thing happened to Florida, we'd be in the same position. It might have been an even shorter series had Vanacek been the goalie.
Well, put it this way: Game 5 would have not have gone to Florida.
No, for sure. And and that's the thing that a lot of teams rely on too, is eventually you hope that your goalie will steal you a game. And Bobrovsky has certainly done that for the Panthers.
Now, this is not to insult Wall, okay?
No.
I'm not here trying to insult Wall. But what I am saying is Wall was not as good a goaltender in the series as Stolarz was, in my opinion. I know we had a small sample size in the playoffs, barely a game. So there's a small sample size. But there is a quality of Stolarz that I have found since, I like to pay attention to what's going on. I'm sure you do. And I'm sure anybody who has paid attention, one quality that Stolarz had that I know Wall didn't have, and I know not many goalies have. Stolarz has an innate ability to talk to the other players on the ice. He has that reputation that he's capable of talking to the players, and he's almost like a partial coach on the ice, and he's giving players heads up on what's going on. And I think a goalie that can do that really well, I can see an advantage there. So it's not just that they missed his goaltending a little bit. He's only a little bit better than Wall. But I think that function that he provides to the team on the ice in real time is an advantage that other goalies don't give the Leafs that the Leafs have. And I dare say there aren't that many goalies in the National Hockey League that have the ability to talk to their players the way Stolarz does.
No, that's very true. One of the things that you consistently hear about him is the fact that he is as much of a communicator as he is. It doesn't appear like he ever stops talking out there. So, giving his players heads up, like you mentioned, telling them exactly what's going on, that is something that unfortunately Joseph Wall may not have been the very best at. So something to work on the off season for sure. But at the end of the day, the fact of the matter is we took them to 7 games with a backup goalie. So
there's no question that Wall was the backup goalie. He's been the backup goalie since about 2/3 of the season?
Sounds about right.
Yeah. So we knew that Stolarz was the number one goalie at that time. And going in, he knew he was the number one goalie. And Wall knew he was that Stolarz was the number one goalie. So I just wanted to close that loop because as easy as it is to criticize the Maple Leafs, Shanahan, and take that 11 years that Shanahan was in and try to create a belief that Leaf team was the same through all 11 years. No, it was a team that did improve. Unfortunately, what made his job disappear is that every time they had an opportunity to take the next step, and the next step was only a goal. One goal. That's all it would have taken for the Leafs, for you as a Leaf fan, for the rest of the Leaf fans, and for me as an observer, to change the history of the Maple Leafs. A goal here, say 2 goals. The Leafs, we don't know how far they would have gone because many have admitted, and they've admitted it because it's a fact. Unfortunately for the Leafs, they played Stanley Cup champs on the way to getting booted too many times.
The old saw that Stanley Cup comes through Toronto is not necessarily an aphorism anymore. It's more of a truism at this point.
Yeah. So, to be fair to Shanahan, to be fair to the Toronto Maple Leafs, because I don't like kicking people while they're down. And in this case, that's what we would be doing if we didn't at least speak some of the truths that they have a right to be heard. And those truths I just told right now, unfortunately, they're all speculative, right? Because Stolarz wasn't in goal. So as much as I want to talk about how great he was and all his help to the players on the ice, we didn't get a chance to see it, so we don't know if that's the case. But I would have to say that I stand up behind what I'm saying, because the odds would have been better for the Leafs if Stolarz was in goal.
Yeah, and regular season numbers bear that out. But we are where we are. There is work that needs to be done in the off season. There are players to be signed. There are players to be left unsigned. I'm not saying it's a rebuild or a teardown or anything like that, but certainly a restructuring of sorts needs to take place.
Well, the difference this year is that the restructuring that can take place, assuming Marner's gone and assuming the cap takes a bit of a bigger lift than it's had in past, means the Leafs for the first time I think the only time they ended the season with cap space, I think, was the first year of the core five. The rest of the time they went to the cap.
As it currently stands, as at July 1st, the Maple Leafs will be looking at a projected cap hit of $69.79 million. The salary floor is 70.6. The cap upper limit is going to be 95.5 million. So as it currently stands, the Leafs are under the salary floor just barely, and they need to sign 7 or 8 players with $25.7 million in the kitty.
25. When was the last time the Leafs had that to spend in the offseason?
Dude, I can't even tell you. I really can't.
I'm telling you that it wasn't more than the first year that Austin Matthews was drafted. The first or second, so it would have been 2 years that they would have had to start to pay them, right? After the second year. So 2 years after Austin Matthews came here, all of a sudden they started going to the cap. And don't forget, right the freaking away, they had to give up players and give draft choices to get rid of them because their salary was too much. Like the guy that they lived with, that Marner and Matthews lived with. Remember? They had to give away a first-round draft pick so that Carolina would take him. And he could have just retired and solved the whole problem, but he didn't. But he retired soon after. He went to San Jose and retired. So, so the Leafs right now, I got to say, you're right. 26 million, that'll be enough to play with. That'll be enough to do something to find an impact player and have some money left over for some other players. But by saying that means there's enough money there to bring Marner back if they want to do that. Because nobody's convinced me that he's not coming back. I'm not convinced that he's not coming back. I'm not convinced that he is. I'm just not convinced of either. Are you?
He did a lot of speaking in the past tense. Like, I've loved my time here, and I've enjoyed my time in Toronto, and these guys are great, and they were great to play with.
And I don't want to be traded to a Canadian team.
Well, I'm pretty sure he'd prefer somewhere that doesn't tax.
Well, I don't know. The rumor mill is going crazy. So, and then he talked about he wanted to go to a no state tax team.
There are a few places that could potentially crop up for him.
They're talking about Florida. They're saying that Florida could end up with him.
Yeah, I mean, the Hurricanes also offered Mikko Rantanen at one point before moving him to Dallas. Tulsky could try again.
Actually, Aaron, do you know what really happened there? I more than a rumor. This is more than a rumor. They were willing to give Rantanen to the Leafs for Nyes.
See, that would have been interesting.
Nyes didn't want to go, and the Leafs said no because of his age and because of the position. I'm not sure that was. I'm truly not sure. I'm not sure what to think of that because I hold Nyes and. Well, you know how I feel about Nyes. On this show, I referred to him as the best Leaf in the playoffs.
Yeah.
And there are people that could argue that at a point. Once he got injured, that kind of changed. Like if the guy that started against Ottawa was the guy that played against Florida, the Leafs might have had another chance to win the series just because of him. They didn't get the big goals from him that they got against Ottawa and early in the Florida season.
And there are plenty of places that he could land. Chicago is one, Detroit is another,
Pittsburgh
is a third.
Vegas.
Vegas has always had cap issues, though. Unless they're willing to shed salary to bring him in, I'm not 100% sure it would work. The Kings and Ducks, for sure.
If Vegas traded the rights to a player, traded a player to Toronto for the rights to Marner.
Well, there's that possibility as well. Another leading contender is the Islanders, with their new GM Matthew Darche in. Marner could be a very much needed boost to their offense. The only issue there is, again, salary cap. Ken Holland with the Kings just took over there. Might be a little leery of shelling out $13 million, but it is possible.
Or 14.
Yeah.
Because
in all honesty, though,
a bidding war for him. There's going to be a bidding war.
Carolina might be the best match, and he'd be reunited with a few other players. So it's there's always that to consider. I'm not looking forward to how this is all going to fall out in the off season. I think he's probably played his last game as a Leaf. It'd be a shame to see him go
for nothing,
but especially for nothing. When you have that much money invested in a player and his training and upkeep and all of that and his development,
he's an asset.
Prefer to keep him. He's a huge asset.
He's an asset. Why do you want to lose an asset for nothing? Why would you want to? No, you don't want to. But in my opinion, Aaron, and this is what I've learned under this Maple Leaf regime, the core four history, is that actually the biggest asset you can have. And this is what we've learned, Aaron, with the Toronto Maple Leafs over these past 10 years. The best asset is cap space.
Yeah, and the Leafs need to relearn how to weaponize that.
They definitely do, because the absence of cap space has been their undoing, and probably the reason why they have no first-round draft picks in the next 3 years. As much as you want to talk about, getting players at the trade deadline. You don't really, the trade deadline is an old story. I don't think that the trade deadline serves as it once did. I don't think it serves the same way. I think it's a lot less effective than it's been in the past. It's not like Butch Goring where he gets traded to the Islanders and they win 5 Stanley Cups. I don't think we have that I don't think you get that kind of help in the trade deadline. It's, look at Florida. The trade deadline got them a couple of people, right? That basically helped them. But the reason it helped them is because they're already playing with more cap space than anybody else already. And then they got more guys, because of injuries and stuff. Yeah, Florida's a loaded team. They're on their way to making it to the Stanley Cup final. I don't know that anybody can even honestly, even on a long bet, assume that. I hope Carolina can stretch them a little bit, because I'm hoping Edmonton gets in, and I'd like to see Florida get a little tired, maybe a couple more injuries, and we can see our first Canadian champion since the Montreal Canadiens of 1993. Yeah, 19, not 2000, 1993.
32 years.
The year Gilmore played for the Leafs.
Yep.
Yeah, so I'd like to see that. I'd like to see Edmonton do it, and good for the Edmonton fans. Aaron, as much as we like to whine about being Leaf fans in Toronto, think about what Edmonton's been through the last 2-3 years. Just think of what they've been through. I mean, they weren't in the playoffs. They had the best player in the world. People were talking about him wanting to leave Edmonton. He actually made subtle noises about, this can't go on. I'm not going to play for, I can't stand this. And then have the season that they've started, losing in the 7th game. Oh my goodness. Like, you got to love being an Edmonton fan this year. It looks like they're going to get another kick at the can if they can carry on with Dallas, because they could be ahead 3-0 if they don't give up a 3-1 lead.
They very well could be. And the way that they put everything together on Friday and on Saturday was a sight to behold and wonderful.
Absolutely. Good for them. Tell me about Nylander, and I know you're happy about how he helped the team get a bronze medal. Canada's not even in there. Can you imagine a bronze medal? And that's Denmark and Switzerland.
And here's the thing that absolutely blows my mind. Switzerland is the team that gets the silver in overtime against Team USA. That
They almost
that was something. So, I'm glad that he's continuing his really productive and successful season, getting a medal on home soil. A hard-fought win for them. And again, I think that's actually Team USA's first World Championship since
33 years. 33 years.
Yeah,
33. Like
a long
Canada winning a Stanley Cup.
It's actually the first gold medal for the United States since 1933.
Yeesh.
Yeah, so they've won the World Juniors, but they've never won the men's World Ice Hockey Championships before.
And like on American Sports Channel, they said, well, it's not something that American players care about, that and NHL players don't really. They get NHL players that are out and yada 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 yada. But you know what? Good for the Americans. Good for them. Good for Nylander getting a bronze. Happy to see that he did well. Hey, listen, I want to hear about this. The French Open.
Yes, this was actually really nice to see. Victoria Mbolko won her first Grand Slam match. She's just 18. She's still relatively new to the top level of tennis, but she's making the most of her first season on tour. She got a victory in her Grand Slam debut on Sunday at the French Open. She beat Lulu Sun 6-1, 7-6. And Lulu was actually the 2024 Wimbledon quarterfinalist. So Mbolko has claimed all 8 sets she's played over the past week plus on the red clay at Roland Garros, including 6 in a trio of triumphs in the qualifying rounds. Obviously she says she's been playing since the age of 12. She hasn't really felt, anything like this before. But congratulations to her on that. That's great. She gets to continue playing, so that's even better.
Let's talk about, I'm looking here. We're going to stretch time a little bit, Aaron, but if you have to go, just let me know. But I just wanted to talk about Nikolai Ehlers.
Yeah.
For the Leafs. I'd love to see that guy on Toronto.
Well, I'd love to see him on Toronto too. With the cap going up as much as it is, they can take a chance on him. He made $6 million last year. He's 29 years old. He had 39 assists and 63 points, which is only one off of his career high from 2016, 2017. So, he put up 5 goals and 7 points in 8 playoff games. Compared to his regular season numbers, it's not all that fantastic, but he was clutch when Winnipeg needed him to be clutch.
And he was in the World Championships too.
Yeah,
beautiful in there too.
There are some people that are saying that you're better off avoiding Ehlers in favor of somebody like Brock Besser. But Besser has a more limited sample size in terms of playoff games played. But in the 29 postseason games that he has been played, the argument can be made that he's a little more dependable with 11 goals and 23 points. But
he's got some sandpaper too in his record.
He does, but in 45 career playoff games, Ehlers had 9 goals and 21 points. So he's just averaging just under a half a point a game, which is something the Leafs could definitely have used. When the top 4 got cold.
Hey, look, now I'm gonna punch to the gut to Dubas and Shanahan. You remember a very long time ago when they were trying to sign Marner, and then Hyman came up free, and I told you, and I told anybody who was willing to listen, if I had to pick between Marner and Hyman, and I am just sitting here today asking myself, after everything that's happened, and everything that Hyman's done in the playoffs, and everything that Marner hasn't done in the playoffs, oh, I can't believe how right I was. But that's because the only reason I'm right is because I admired his go-to, his gumption, his I don't want to lose. Like, Hyman is a guy, he's a bull in a china shop, and he's laser focused for that net and scoring that goal. And that's one of the qualities the Leafs have missed. And that's why I'm rooting for it. That's another reason why I'm rooting for Edmonton, because I can't wait to see that guy raise the cup. I can't think of a imagine 2 Toronto natives, McDavid and Hyman, raising the cup and bringing it here, having a mini Stanley Cup parade.
And here's the thing, Stuart Skinner was hugely impressive.
Totally.
He made 33 saves to improve to 4-4 in postseason play. This is his first win in the playoffs that wasn't a shutout. He's got four wins, 3 of those were shutouts. So that is definitely something that he's definitely turned the corner on. I know his regular season at times was nothing to write home about and caused some trepidation.
Aaron, it doesn't matter anymore. That's what's so beautiful about the playoffs. You live for today, and the players that can live for today and forget about yesterday are the players that get further along. And these are the qualities that the Leafs have missed. These are the qualities the Leafs need, where the players as individuals and as a group play for today's game. A team that would have played for Game 5 and Game 5 alone would have won that game. A team that plays for Game 7 and only Game 7 would have won Game 7. This is just my opinion because I can't prove it, but I really believe it in my heart. The way I believe that Hyman was a better keeper than Marner, and I said at the time they could get Hyman for less than Marner, and then they could have used that money to get somebody else. Because I know, and now I know I was right. My hunch back then was right because seeing what they've done in the playoffs, the two of them, you see how many goals Hyman's had in the playoffs? 30 something.
It's absolutely ridiculous, the difference between Marner's playoff performance and Hyman's playoff performance. He had 2 goals and an assist in the last game. McDavid had 2 goals. As it currently stands, I think Ryan Nugent-Hopkins had 3 assists in the last game. He's now had multiple points in every game of the series so far, becoming the only Oiler in franchise history other than Wayne Gretzky with more than 1 point in the first 3 games of a conference final. And what this team is currently doing is absolutely ridiculous, and I'm loving it.
And you know what people forget? And I think this is the funniest part about the Edmonton Oilers. They forget that the Oilers had, 4 first overall picks in a row?
Yeah.
And 2 of them are still on the team. Imagine that. So, it's amazing what the Oilers have done and how they've done it. And for those of you that are saying, oh, well, Hyman's playing with McDavid. No, he doesn't. He plays with him on the power play, but he's on the second line. He's not on. He doesn't play with McDavid now. And not only that, Marner had a pretty good player in Austin Matthews to play with. Don't you think? So I miss Hyman. Hyman, I love that guy from the first time I saw him, and the fact that he comes from an interesting background. His father owned MTHL teams. The guy's a hockey. He's a hockey kid, like in so many ways. And he owns his own minor hockey team now as well. I think he's a partner in a junior CHL team as well, I think. And, so this is a guy that lives and breathes hockey. And I'm disappointed. I'm disappointed every playoff year when I watch what he does in Edmonton and I go, I knew he could have done it for Toronto. It would have been nice. Like he would have been the guy that would have scored the Game 7 winner, against the Bruins or against Tampa.
Yeah, you have to wonder, with Ryan Nugent-Hopkins having 14 points in his last 10 games and Connor McDavid having 13 points in his last 10 games, Zach Hyman only has 8. Is he a drag on the first line?
Of course he is. Of course he is. Of course he is. But the kind of drag he is the kind of drag you wish. Well, he drives the other teams to distraction there, and that's why I've always loved him. Like, when he goes to the front of the net, it's not about the cross check he gets. It's about the cross check he takes. The guy, he's a sucker for punishment, but when the puck is around the crease, somehow his stick finds it. He reminds me of Andrechuk. He reminds me of who's the latest Leaf? There was, Tavares.
Yeah.
Scoring in close and able to get a shot at the puck and able to do it. Yeah, the Leafs have made some mistakes. Shanahan's mistakes, that he's made were ones that hurt in the past and will hurt in the future. But the important thing is as Leaf fans and people out there who love the Maple Leafs and love the NHL and all that kind of stuff, the Leafs now are under the control of a guy named Treliving, and they have a coach. And I think, universally speaking, Aaron, I think this would be a fair statement. If there's two people the Leafs had to be stuck with running the team, those aren't the two worst people that the Leaf fans have seen the past 11 years.
No, for sure. I can honestly say, after having seen Treliving's first year, I'm feeling a lot better about heading into this offseason and the potential direction that this team is going to take. I'm a huge fan of Berube's coaching style and the systems that he's tried to put into place for this team as well.
And the biggest thing that he does, I think that's the most important thing that Berube does, is he understands the players. And he understands, he's a motivational coach. And as much as, the Game 7 and Game 5 failure, I don't think that was on him. But he does a good job of being motivational. He's not an X's and O's guy, but they bring in X's and O's guys to help the players understand what Berube wants.
Oh, for sure.
Well, listen, Aaron, closing comment? We laughed about Swiss and Denmark there in the last four. We laughed about that. That was funny.
Yeah, but at the same time, it's great strides, and these players are players that you can't really ignore anymore. You've got to make sure that you pay more attention to them, because they will show you up.
And we should remember one parting little comment. The King and the Misses are here. They landed in Ottawa. So we've got the King and the Misses are in Canada. They're in town in Ottawa. A lot of people are very excited about that. So enjoy the King, enjoy the hockey, and let's see if those Edmonton Oilers can bring it home. It'll be fun if they do. I got to tell you, Aaron, thanks for doing this.
Always a pleasure.
He's Aaron William Freeland. I'm Candid Frank Stanishi, and you can follow me on YouTube, Candid Frank Stanishi 1023. Thanks for watching, everybody. We'll see you next time. Enjoy the hockey tonight. It should be a lot of fun. Will they be eliminated, I guess, is the $1 million question.